Hey everybody, welcome back to another video. I hope you guys are all having a wonderful Saturday. Today I wanted to share with you a little secret that I've been using to label my phantom crested geckos, and I feel like it's brought a lot of clarity to my future planning of projects with phantoms, and I want to share it with you today because I hope it can help you with your projects as well. If you've ever bred phantom crested geckos before, you'll know it can be kind of hard to pick out holdbacks, right? And if you don't know what phantoms are, basically they're like patternless animals. So for example here, if I show you these two extreme harlequins and we just base it on color and coverage, it's pretty easy to see which one's a little bit nicer. Extreme harlequins are known for having a lot of pattern, so in that case it'd make obvious sense which one we should keep if we were just basing it on that. One has a lot more color and coverage and the other one not so much, right? So with phantoms being patternless, they don't have as much to judge on. Now there are a couple factors that you should really judge every crested gecko, and I guess basically every reptile on, and that would be number one, is it healthy? Good structure, good coverage, no extra toes, everything looks to be in the right place, just basic stuff like that. I've talked about this many times in other videos. That's not what we're talking about today. But once you get past all that with phantoms, what can you really judge them on? I mean, it's really hard, and I ran into this issue this year. I have a lot of red phantoms, and phantoms come in a bunch of different colors, not just red, but that's what I work with. It's a recessive gene, and there's like red, orange, yellow, brown, dark base. There's quite a few different colors of phantoms, but you can kind of see the problem here. They all look the same. They're all patternless. It can be really hard to choose which ones to keep and which ones to let go. So this year I've started doing something new, and I feel like it's really helped me out and I wanted to share it with you. So these labels are just made up, but I've been giving all the phantoms I plan on keeping a either WP, split, or SP label. And what those mean is WP is weak pinning, split is a little bit of a mix, and then SP is strong pinning. Now, back in the day, phantoms used to often be called phantom pinstripes, and that's because down the dorsal or down the back of the phantom, they oftentimes have pinstripe scales. Pinstripe is an entirely separate thing, and what pinstripe does is it makes the raised scales along the back, right? And you can have partial pinstripes where it comes down part way, you can have full pinstripes where it goes all the way, etc., right? But with phantoms, that's not always the case, and so there's a reason why I've started labeling them, and I wanted to share it with you because I hope this helps you when creating nicer phantom crested geckos. Let's start with WP, which is weak pinning. A thing that's been very popular in the crested gecko community, I would say over the last couple years really, has been the red phantoms with white spots, something similar to this, right? Well, to create those white spots, they come up from the belly. They always come up from below and they raise up, and the goal is to get those white spots higher and higher on the gecko, right? Well, pinstriping is coming across and creating that lateral pattern, and so if you have really strong pinstripe genes, you're not going to get those white spots that raise up. So what this would mean is that if you were trying to create a red phantom white spot project, you would try and avoid geckos that have very strong pinstriping. And this is important because with phantoms, oftentimes the pinstripe scales are not highlighted, so if you're not looking for it, you might not see it, you might throw it into your white spot project, and it actually might be harming you more than it's helping you. Even though the animal looks patternless, if it has those pinstripe genes, it's really going to be hurting you. And I can show you a couple examples here of why this works and why you would not want to do this. So first, let's look at a gecko that I would consider weak pinning. So you can see this gecko here, if we look at its dorsal going down, there's no set row of really strong scales. They're just kind of all over the place, right? This is an example of a gecko with really weak pinning, right? It basically is just by the crest and then it kind of stops and it doesn't go any further, right? Now going back to those geckos I was talking about, the red phantoms with white spots, I would say one of the originators, or at least one of my favorite breeders of them, is a breeder called Underground Geckos of Texas. They have some of the most beautiful, amazing red phantom and white spot geckos, and I believe they're one of the first people to really start working on this going forward. So if you go to their website like we are right now, we take a look at their porthole project, we just click on a couple of the photos here. As you can see, the majority of these geckos that have the really nice, obviously the red, but also the really high white spots, also have either split or very weak pinning. The majority of them are on the weaker side. There's not many of them that have a lot of pinning at all, and it's creating all those really nice white spots that are going really high up on the animal. I have a feeling that if they were really strong pinning, you would not see animals like this. I believe it would be quite the opposite. So weak pinning, if you're looking for white spot animals, you want that really weak pinning, and the weaker the better. Now obviously the animal that I had showed you a little while ago didn't have any white spots, but that's something that I could work in there if I wanted to. Next up, let's talk about split. Now, split is just another made-up term that I made so that I can keep track of my own animals, and you can use whatever you want. But these tend to be more average and more common, and I would say these are probably the most common for phantoms, where they'll have little rows of pinstripe scales here and there, and then they'll have where they don't have any, right? And maybe it's more pinning and then less weak, or maybe it's more weak and less pinning, any combination. This is probably the most common, or maybe some of the scales are raised up, etc., right? There's a little bit of both going on, and these geckos can also make great for a white spot project. This is where the majority of phantoms, I feel like, fall. If you go on MorphMarket right now and you just start checking them out, I would say the majority are going to be either split or a little bit on one side or the other. It's pretty rare, actually, where you have some that are super weak, like that example I showed you earlier, or super strong, like I'll show you in a little bit. I personally feel like the majority are somewhere here in the middle, kind of broken up, right? And these geckos could be good for both if you're looking to do a kind of phantom, I hate to use this term, phantom pinstripe project, but where you're trying to get those really strong pinstripe scales going, or if you're trying to do a really weak project, you could probably do that as well. So the last one we have to talk about today is SP, or strong pinning, and again, made up term, but this is a gecko that has very strong scales going all the way down its dorsal, hopefully all the way in full. And these geckos are not good if you want to create a red phantom white spot project. And I would advise against using these in that type of project, and I can show you why. So here's a little baby guy, right? He's pretty small yet, but you can see that he's starting to get some almost like quad striping on his sides, right? And he has a lot of pinstripe in him. That's what's creating those super strong scales down his back, and going down his sides too. It's starting to create that lateral quad pattern, right? So I'm guessing, and this is just a theory of mine, but my guess is that those white spots on his sides that are creating that line, if he didn't have that super strong pinstripe gene, would be actually little white spots. So what it's doing is it's taking all those little white spots and kind of grouping them up there and creating that almost quad stripe going on, because he's got that strong pinstripe gene in him. And so if he didn't have that, I bet this would be a white spot gecko. So the reason you wouldn't want to use this for white spots is that if you start breeding that in there, you're probably going to start losing your white spots and getting more quadding. So essentially what I'm trying to say to you is, if you want really nice red phantom white spots, make sure you're using geckos that have either low pinning or no pinning at all. You're going to get those spots to come up a lot higher than if you were using geckos that have super strong pinning. Now I'm sure you can get pinstripes that have very strong white spots as well, because I know normal pinstripes can have a lot of pattern, but I'm just saying that if you're trying to make it easy on yourself, you might as well give yourself an advantage and start with geckos that are already low pinning, right, to create those nice white spots. On the other hand, if you're trying to create a gecko with strong pinning, I would avoid those geckos that have very weak pinning to start with, because you can get some that already have a lot stronger pinning going down the back. And so it's really depending on what you're trying to work on and what projects you're trying to create. I know for me right now, I'm keeping a few that have very weak, a few that are in the middle, and then I didn't actually produce that many that have super strong pinning, so I'm keeping all those as well, male or female. But anyway, this is something I thought would be kind of interesting if you're working with red phantoms, or any color phantom, I guess. This is something that you should probably keep in mind, and I think it's going to help me a lot going forward. With that being said, I appreciate all of you watching this video, and I hope to see you in my next one.